So imagine a nonprofit CEO getting caught diverting $24 million from a strictly restricted building fund, and they put it into the series of like totally sham corporate bonds.
Right, just completely making up investments.
Yeah. And then when the external auditors finally start poking around and asking uncomfortable questions, the leadership team totally panics. So they secretly funnel another $26 million to, cover up the initial missing funds.
It's like a classic Ponzi-adjacent cover-up.
Exactly.
Mm.
And when the entire financial house of cards inevitably collapses, one of the senior board members literally attempts to flee the country on a motorized boat, like the day before his prison sentence begins.
Which is just wild.
Right. Now, imagine that nonprofit organization is actually a church, and that CEO is this globally revered, almost untouchable spiritual leader.
I mean, it sounds like the plot of a corporate thriller, honestly, but it is a fully documented reality, and it represents this massive structural crisis that is currently shaking institutions all over the world.
Welcome to the Deep Dive, everyone. Our mission today is to explore a really profound and, frankly, deeply troubling phenomenon. We're looking at the systemic, catastrophic collapse of high-profile leadership across the global Christian landscape.
Yeah, and to guide our analysis today, we're relying on this exhaustive, really fascinating report titled Beyond Denominations, Celebrity Culture, and the Crisis of Accountability.
And I want to establish our framework right up front for you listening. When people see these massive public failures, like a famous leader falls or a ministry goes bankrupt because of a scandal, the natural reflex is to blame it on bad theology.
Right.
People just say, oh, they simply strayed from their foundational beliefs.
Right, which, that narrative serves a very specific institutional purpose because it allows an organization to basically quarantine the failure.
Oh, interesting. How so?
Well, they can say the problem was that one individual's specific beliefs or just a personal moral failing. It's not the system itself. Our beliefs are different, so our structure is inherently safe.
Okay, let's unpack this, because the data in this report tells a completely different story.
Totally different, yeah.
The root cause of these collapses isn't primarily theological at all. It is sociological and ecclesiastical. We are looking at the fusion of secular celebrity culture with really severe structural vulnerabilities in corporate governance.
Exactly. And that sociological lens is just absolutely crucial for what we're discussing today.
Right, because whether you listening right now are deeply religious or maybe just somewhat spiritual or even a staunch atheist, this analysis is an absolute masterclass in how human psychology, power dynamics, and unchecked branding can dismantle literally any community.
Yeah. And I want to note, we are going to be examining various theological frameworks today, movements like Neo-Calvinism, the seeker-sensitive model, the prosperity gospel. But, and this is key, we are examining them strictly as sociological frameworks.
Just the mechanics of it.
Right. We're analyzing the mechanics of human behavior and organizational structure. So we are maintaining absolute neutrality here. We are not endorsing or condemning any of the underlying religious beliefs.
Exactly. We are essentially examining the blueprints of the bridge to understand why it collapsed, regardless of the river it's built over.
I like that analogy. Yeah.
So before we can really understand how these organizational leaders eventually fall, we first have to deconstruct the modern machinery that builds them up in the first place. The report draws a really sharp line between two concepts we almost always conflate: celebrity versus fame.
We definitely use those words interchangeably in casual conversation, but historically and sociologically, they are vastly different phenomena.
Right.
In classical contexts, fame was understood as this natural and often unsought byproduct of a life well lived.
Like it wasn't the goal.
Exactly. You achieved fame through exceptional virtue or profound personal sacrifice, or just undeniable mastery of a skill that materially benefited the common good. You did not seek the fame, you sought the virtue, and fame was just the secondary result.
Right. Fame wasn't the target they were aiming at. It was just like the shadow cast by a towering achievement. Somebody makes a massive scientific discovery or shows incredible bravery in a crisis, and the public just naturally remembers them for it.
But celebrity is a uniquely modern construct. It is inextricably linked to mass media, commercial branding, and this really deliberate, highly calculated curation of a public persona.
Right. A celebrity actively chases the public eye.
Oh, absolutely. They utilize public relations teams, media agencies, digital algorithms, all to manufacture mass recognition. And the defining sociological characteristic of this modern celebrity model, particularly in a religious context, is what the report calls social power without proximity.
Okay. Social power without proximity. That phrase carries a ton of weight. Let's break down the mechanics of how that lack of proximity actually functions in a real leadership dynamic.
Well, proximity is the absolute prerequisite for authentic accountability.
Okay.
Because when a leader is in physical and relational proximity to you, you observe them in the mundane realities of daily life, right? You see their flaws, you observe their temperament when the microphone is turned off.
Yeah, you see how they treat the waiter at a restaurant.
Exactly. You witness how they handle minor frustrations. Proximity provides corrective friction. Celebrity, on the other hand, intentionally creates and honestly weaponizes distance.
Wow. Weaponizes it.
Yes, because it allows a leader to curate an image of unassailable piety or wisdom. They hide behind this impenetrable shield of PR staff, VIP green rooms, and sycophantic handlers.
So they possess this unilateral ability to shape the minds and lives of millions of people, yet nobody in the crowd actually knows them as a human being.
Nope.
Think about traditional mentorship or local care. It's kind of like having a local family doctor, right? They know your medical history, they know your weird family dynamic, they know your bad habits.
Right, it's deeply rooted in reality.
Yeah, even if it isn't glamorous. But what this report describes with the modern celebrity model is akin to getting all your medical and lifestyle advice from a heavily filtered Instagram fitness influencer.
That is a perfect comparison.
Because they present this flawless aesthetic, their life appears perfectly optimized and they project absolute authority. But they are essentially an unassailable avatar. You cannot ask them to check your specific symptoms, and they bear literally zero actual liability for your health.
And yet millions of people substitute that influencer's curated image for actual localized care. And in the religious and nonprofit context, we see the exact same psychological mechanism at play. Sociologist Eugene Peterson termed this phenomenon secondhand living.
Secondhand living. So we basically outsource our own lived experience to the avatar on the screen.
Yes. He also refers to it as compensatory heroism, because the reality is that personal growth, whether spiritual, emotional, intellectual, is inherently arduous. It is unglamorous, it's slow, and it's frequently very painful.
Yeah, nobody really wants to do the hard work.
Exactly. So rather than engaging in that difficult internal work, followers engage in this toxic symbiosis with the celebrity leader. They substitute the perceived vitality, the massive platform, and the undeniable success of their charismatic leader for their own growth. It is vastly easier to join a massive crowd cheering for a spiritual superhero on a huge stage than it is to sit in a quiet room and confront your own personal flaws.
I mean, I totally understand the toxicity of the commercialization here, but I want to push back on the underlying impulse just a little bit. Isn't it just fundamental human nature to seek out heroes? We have built societies around mythological figures and epic heroes since the dawn of recorded history.
Oh, the desire for a hero or a model of virtue is deeply, deeply human. You're right. The toxicity arises from the modern media environment's demand for absolute, unblemished flawlessness, coupled with the monetization of that image.
The money changes things.
Right. The crowd demands an entertaining, perfectly polished performance. And in return, the leader is heavily incentivized to project absolute invulnerability. They cannot exhibit weakness or doubt.
Because admitting weakness threatens the financial viability of the brand.
Precisely. When you are a respected leader in a local village, people know you are human. They accept your flaws because they know your underlying character. But when you are a global brand, your humanity literally becomes a corporate liability.
Wow. Your humanity is a liability.
Yeah. And the report notes that in our modern secular age, which often lacks those deeply embedded traditional community structures, people attempt to find transcendence by consuming these highly curated images of individuals they will never truly interact with.
So this consumerist demand for a spectacular superhero fundamentally alters the value system of the entire community. The followers want a compelling show, and the leader provides it to maintain their elevated status and the revenue that comes with it.
Yes, and this dynamic paves the way for what the report calls the theology of the spectacle.
Okay, here is where it gets really interesting. The culture demands a spectacle, and the organizational theology inevitably evolves to justify that demand.
It has to, yeah. The report includes a really compelling theological and sociological critique here. Theologian Michael Horton observes this deeply ingrained modern impatience and disdain for the ordinary.
Disdain for the ordinary.
Right. The relentless cultural pressure for faith, or really any organizational mission to be radical, extreme, or world-changing, creates an environment that is actively hostile to the mundane, slow realities of historic, traditional community life.
And think about this in the context of your own life, listening right now. We see this impatience everywhere, right?
Mm.
How often do we abandon slow, steady progress because we are addicted to the spectacular result?
All the time.
Like, we don't want a protocol that offers a 5% improvement over 5 years.
Yeah.
We want the biohack that optimizes our entire life by next Tuesday.
Right, the silver bullet.
Yeah.
Right.
We don't want the quiet, sometimes boring relationship that slowly builds deep trust over decades. We want the cinematic, overwhelming romance. And this report argues that this exact same consumerist impatience has thoroughly infected institutional structures.
It really has. Theologians categorize this shift as moving from a theology of the cross to a theology of glory.
Okay, what's the distinction there?
Well, a theology of the cross, in historical terms, recognizes the reality of suffering, obscurity, human frailty, and that incremental, difficult growth we were just talking about. A theology of glory, conversely, idolizes statistical growth, rhetorical polish, material wealth, and undeniable, highly visible success.
So it's optics versus reality, essentially.
Pretty much. The report references historian Carl Trueman, who points out this striking historical contrast. When the Apostle Paul was writing to the early Christian church in the first century, giving them instructions on how to select local leaders, he did not instruct them to find charismatic, world-changing visionaries.
Right.
Or brilliant orators. He explicitly directed them to find ordinary, respectable individuals who were known in their local community for managing their own households well and just living quietly.
That is so fascinating. The qualification was essentially find someone who is normal, boring, and fundamentally reliable in their daily life.
Yes, and compare that ancient localized metric to the modern industrial complex of publishing houses, mega conferences, and global media ministries today.
Night and day.
The modern paradigm completely inverts the historical model. We elevate the spectacular performer and structurally marginalize the faithful, ordinary individual.
Okay, so we understand the cultural demand for a spectacle, and we see how the internal culture morphs to justify it. But how does the physical, legal structure of the organization actually allow this leader to operate without guardrails?
Right. That's the structural piece.
Because a charismatic personality is one element, but how do they obtain the keys to a massive financial and structural empire without anyone possessing the authority to pull the emergency brake?
Exactly.
To understand that, we have to examine the architecture of failure and look at how these corporate boards actually operate.
And this is where the sociological data becomes incredibly concrete. The report provides a really interesting comparative analysis of historical church governance models.
Yeah, let's break those down.
Traditionally, Protestant governance falls into three primary categories. First, you have the Episcopalian model. This involves hierarchical oversight by regional bishops or external superiors. Its primary structural strength is strong, independent external oversight. A local leader answers to someone outside their immediate sphere of influence. However, its historical vulnerability is institutional self-protection.
Meaning what exactly?
Meaning the upper hierarchy might shield a high-ranking abusive leader just to protect the broader reputation of the institution as a whole.
That's the classic corporate maneuver, where upper management covers up a regional director scandal to protect the company's stock price.
Exactly. Now, the second historical model is Presbyterian in governance. This features representative oversight by a series of interconnected local, regional, and national councils.
So it's more democratic.
Yes, it incorporates multiple layers of appellate courts to prevent a local leader from becoming a tyrant. Its strength is distributed authority, but its vulnerability is bureaucratic inertia.
It moves too slow.
Way too slow. And a massively wealthy celebrity pastor with a massive platform might simply intimidate or out-resource the regional councils. Yeah. And then the third model is congregational governance. This is democratic oversight directly by the local membership. The leadership answers directly to the voting laity. Its strength is direct, immediate accountability.
But I'm guessing the weakness is the crowd itself.
You guessed it. Its weakness is that a highly charismatic speaker can easily manipulate the crowd, leading to populism and just emotionally driven decision-making.
Okay, so those historical models all have defined pros and cons. They're definitely imperfect, but they have built-in structural tensions.
Yes.
But the report identifies a fatal hybrid model that has emerged in recent decades, specifically designed to facilitate the celebrity leader.
Yes. Ecclesiastical scholars term this modern hybrid presbyterialism.
Presbyterialism.
Right. And it is predominantly found in non-denominational networks, independent megachurches, and modern church planting movements. It intentionally adopts the branding of the Presbyterian model, like it markets itself as being elder-led to project an image of shared authority.
Right, it sounds very official and accountable.
But it fatally marries that branding to the strict, isolated local autonomy of the congregational model.
So it basically creates the illusion of accountability while operating in complete isolation.
Exactly. It systematically removes both the external, independent accountability of a broader denomination and the internal, democratic accountability of the congregation. It concentrates total, unchecked authority into the hands of a really small local board of elders or directors.
And here is the truly fatal structural flaw. The charismatic founder or celebrity leader is almost universally the one who handpicks those board members.
Yes.
They select loyalists. They select wealthy donors who are deeply enamored with the leader's vision. Or they pick subordinate staff members whose very paychecks depend on the leader's continued approval.
Right. You can't have your employee be your boss on the board.
Exactly. The governing board rapidly degenerates into a cadre of yes men. It's wild. This mirrors the exact dynamic of a Silicon Valley startup CEO appointing their best friends and their largest venture capital investors to their board of directors.
It's the exact same playbook.
The CEO completely controls the vision and the culture. The board exists merely to rubber stamp that vision and provide the solution of corporate maturity.
Right.
But the moment the CEO engages in catastrophic misconduct, the board realizes that firing the CEO will inevitably tank the company's valuation. The investors lose their capital, the friends lose their prestige and their access. Confronted with that reality, the board protects the CEO to protect the stock. The exact same corporate preservation instinct activates in these religious institutions.
That analogy perfectly captures the incentive structures at play here. And this dynamic is heavily magnified in what the report calls the parachurch corporate bypass.
What is that exactly?
So parachurch organizations are independent entities. Think of global apologetics networks, massive publishing houses, or itinerant speaking ministries. They operate entirely outside the jurisdiction of any local church discipline or congregational oversight.
Oh, wow.
Legally, they are structured as 501c3 nonprofit corporations in the United States or, equivalent charitable entities elsewhere. So they are governed by a corporate board of directors, not an ecclesiastical or pastoral body.
Which fundamentally alters their legal and operational priorities.
Exactly. Their fiduciary duty shifts from spiritual shepherding to corporate management. Let's define what a fiduciary duty actually means in this context.
Yeah, please.
In corporate law, a board member has a strict legal obligation to act in the best financial and strategic interests of the corporation. When a leader is an itinerant global celebrity, entirely disconnected from the grounding reality of a local community, they operate in this ecclesiastical vacuum.
Right.
So if a moral, financial, or abusive failing occurs, the corporate board's primary fiduciary duty is almost invariably interpreted as protecting the organization's physical assets, its intellectual property, and its overall brand reputation.
Because that is the corporation.
Exactly.
Right.
And this naturally, inevitably leads to secular crisis management tactics.
The board stops acting like spiritual counselors and starts acting like a Fortune 500 crisis PR firm.
Precisely. They deploy non-disclosure agreements, or NDAs, to legally bind victims and whistleblowers to silence. They utilize really lucrative severance packages to quietly remove problematic individuals.
Hush money, basically.
Yeah, pretty much. They launch aggressive public relations spin to control the narrative, and they frequently use the threat of costly litigation to intimidate dissenters. The profound spiritual or moral crisis is treated entirely as a corporate liability to be managed and mitigated.
It is deeply unsettling because it reveals that the stated values of the organization, like truth, morality, transparency, are structurally subordinate to brand protection.
Always.
It is not a glitch in the system. It is the inevitable outcome of the corporate design. And this theoretical framework becomes devastatingly clear when we look at the specific case studies detailed in the report.
It really does.
When the corporate structure is designed to protect the brand, the underlying theology of the organization becomes literally irrelevant. So let's examine the trans-denominational collapse outlined in the Western case studies, beginning with Mark Driscoll and Mars Hill Church in Seattle.
And the fact that these collapses happen across vastly different theological traditions is what proves the sociological thesis here. We are observing leaders from completely different ideological backgrounds who all utilize the exact same structural loopholes.
Right.
Mark Driscoll emerged in the late 1990s as a dominant voice in the neo-Calvinist movement. For context, neo-Calvinism in this era combined strict, historically reformed theology regarding predestination and biblical authority with highly aggressive modern church planting strategies and deeply culturally engaged media.
It was huge for younger demographics.
Huge! Driscoll was known for his combative preaching style, his hyper-masculine rhetoric, and just an incredible ability to build a massive organizational empire. At its peak, Mars Hill Church boasted 15 satellite locations and over 14,000 weekly attendees.
It was an absolute juggernaut. But the eventual implosion of Mars Hill in 2014 wasn't just triggered by a sudden moral scandal. It was actually preceded by a highly calculated legal restructuring of power years earlier.
Yes. Originally, Mars Hill operated with a somewhat distributed authority model. The bylaws allowed for 24 elders to possess voting power on major organizational decisions.
Okay, so that's 24 people.
Right. But in 2007, Driscoll initiated a sweeping legal revision of the church's corporate bylaws. This is a critical mechanism. He managed to concentrate immense unilateral power into the hands of a newly created 5-member executive elder board, which he entirely controlled.
He essentially rewrote the 501c3 corporate charter to make himself functionally unfireable by the broader leadership team.
He did.
But wait, how do you execute a legal coup like that within a nonprofit without triggering a massive revolt from the congregation?
Well, typically it is framed as a necessary evolution for organizational efficiency.
Oh, of course.
Right. As the organization scales rapidly, the leader argues that a large board is just too cumbersome to make agile decisions. But when 2 long-standing elders at Mars Hill, Paul Pittry and Bent Meyer, recognized the danger and objected to this unprecedented power grab, the new centralized authority was immediately weaponized against them.
What happened to them?
They were summarily terminated from their positions, subjected to internal ecclesiastical trials to completely discredit them, and the congregation was explicitly instructed to publicly shun them.
Wow.
Yeah. And following this purge, Driscoll forced the entire congregation to reapply for membership, requiring them to explicitly sign a new agreement submitting to the revised autocratic bylaws. During this period of consolidation, he allegedly declared to his subordinate staff, "I am the brand."
I am the brand. That singular statement really encapsulates the entire crisis. He explicitly equated his personal manufactured persona with the survival of the institution itself.
Next.
And because he held a monopoly on legal and structural power, he survived years of escalating accusations that would have ended a normal career. There were allegations of severe plagiarism, and more shockingly, there was the manipulation of the New York Times bestseller list.
The bestseller list manipulation is just a perfect example of how the corporate machinery operates. The church used hundreds of thousands of dollars in congregational tithes to hire a firm called Result Source.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, the firm's entire business model was utilizing those church funds to bulk buy Driscoll's book from specific retailers across the country, artificially inflating the sales data to guarantee a spot on the bestseller list.
So they literally bought their own books with donation money.
Exactly. This achieved the celebrity metric of success, which in turn justified higher speaking fees and a larger platform for the leader. It is a closed, self-sustaining economic loop funded by the organization but purely benefiting the brand.
And throughout all of this, while creating a profound culture of fear among the staff, the Board of Overseers routinely defended him. They categorized his behavior not as disqualifying abuse, but merely as a domineering style of leadership.
Right, just reframing it.
They protected the asset. It was only when external pressure from the broader church planting network, which he himself had actually co-founded, finally became insurmountable that he resigned, and the church, built entirely around his personality, rapidly dissolved.
It just collapsed.
But the ultimate proof of this structural failure is what happened next. Driscoll simply relocated to Scottsdale, Arizona, founded a new church, and former staff allege he has replicated the exact same mechanisms of absolute control, reportedly even deploying private investigators to surveil former members who dissent.
The system allows the individual to simply take the flawed architectural blueprint and rebuild the empire in a new location. It's incredibly resilient.
So that's the neo-Calvinist model.
Right, so let's pivot to a completely different theological model to demonstrate how universal this vulnerability really is. We look at Bill Hybels and Willow Creek Community Church. This represents the seeker-sensitive pioneer model.
And the seeker-sensitive model is structurally and stylistically the complete opposite of neo-Calvinism. It relies heavily on market research, removing traditional religious liturgy and utilizing contemporary music and highly polished corporate-style programming to attract people who wouldn't normally attend church.
Exactly. It's designed to be as accessible and frictionless as possible. Willow Creek, which was founded in 1975, truly mastered this approach. Hybels became this international leadership guru, exporting his corporate pastoral model globally through massive conferences that were attended by secular business leaders as well as religious figures.
It was a massive network.
But in 2018, he abruptly resigned following highly credible multi-decade allegations of sexual misconduct, emotional intimidation, and the systematic grooming of female subordinates.
And the sociological autopsy here reveals a classic, catastrophic case of proximity failure.
It really does. Following his resignation, an independent advisory group released a comprehensive report, concluding the allegations were entirely credible. But the critical structural finding regarding governance was just devastating. Over multiple decades, the Willow Creek elder boards were fundamentally unable to provide effective oversight.
Decades of zero oversight.
Right, because Hybels' immense global success, his undeniable charisma, and his status as the primary revenue driver thoroughly insulated him from any real critique. Crucially, the elder board's initial instinctual reaction when the allegations first broke was to vigorously defend their celebrity founder and publicly attempt to discredit the women who came forward.
They literally executed the corporate defense playbook. Institutional loyalty and brand preservation overrode their mandate to protect the vulnerable. They protected the stock.
Every time.
Let's examine what the report considers the ultimate example of the parachurch corporate bypass. Ravi Zacharias and RZIM.
Oh, this one is staggering. Ravi Zacharias was globally revered as an apologetics idol. Apologetics is the intellectual defense of religious truth claims, and Zacharias famously debated secular philosophers and atheists at elite universities worldwide. He was presented as the absolute pinnacle of intellectual and moral integrity.
Right.
But following his death in 2020, an exhaustive independent investigation by Guidepost Solutions revealed he was a prolific sexual predator. He utilized vast amounts of international ministry funds to maintain a highly sophisticated, decades-long double life.
And the structural lack of accountability detailed in the report is just mind-blowing. He actively bypassed RZIM's administrative and security networks by using public Wi-Fi networks and burner phones to avoid the internal surveillance of his communications by his own IT department.
Yes.
Using public Wi-Fi to evade your own nonprofit's IT department is like spy-level evasion. It shows a complete breakdown of basic organizational security.
And anyone within the organization who persistently questioned his travel schedule or his behavior was systematically marginalized, demoted, or forced out. It was a process internally known among staff as being sent to Siberia.
Sent to Siberia. Wow.
But the most disturbing revelation regarding governance was the function of the RZIM Executive Committee, which basically operated as a rogue shadow board.
Wait, a shadow board operating within a global nonprofit? How does that even legally function?
Well, it functions by completely hiding financial transactions from the broader governance structure. So in 2017, Zacharias was sued by a Canadian survivor, Lorianne Thompson. During the fallout, the ministry officially claimed to its donors and its staff that no organizational funds were used for his legal defense or settlement.
Okay.
The Guidepost investigation revealed this was a direct, calculated lie. The executive committee secretly approved a $250,000 loan to Zacharias to fund his legal settlement and secure a strict non-disclosure agreement with Thompson to ensure her silence.
A secret loan from donor funds.
Yes. And then they subsequently granted him a $400,000 discretionary bonus, specifically engineered to cover the repayment of that secret loan and the associated tax liabilities.
You've got to be kidding me.
No! These transactions were hidden in what were deemed confidential files, entirely bypassing normal financial auditing and oversight.
So they literally weaponized the nonprofit structure to facilitate a cover-up. They utilized donor money to pay for a secret NDA, provided him a massive bonus to cover the tax hit, and hid the entire operation in a shadow ledger.
That's exactly what they did.
It is the ultimate corporatization of abuse. This proves that it isn't about theology. It's about NDAs, secret loans, and corporate survival.
And that reliance on corporate mechanisms is why we must also briefly look at figures like Steve Lawson and Mike Pilavachi, just to underscore that even strict adherence to historical orthodoxy provides zero protection if the structure is flawed.
Right, because Steve Lawson was a titan in the conservative reform movement, renowned for rigorous expository preaching. Let's define expository preaching for context for the listener.
Okay.
Instead of a pastor picking a self-help topic and finding a random verse to match it, expository preaching involves going through an ancient text line by line, explaining the original languages and historical context. It is highly intellectual, and it grants the speaker an aura of absolute, uncompromising theological authority.
It does. But despite that deep theological precision, particularly regarding human fallibility, Lawson was removed from his massive platforms in 2024 after confessing to a multi-year inappropriate relationship with a woman in her late 20s. He was 74 years old and had been married for 4 decades.
Wow.
The structural enabler here was the itinerant celebrity model. His massive parachurch platform and constant global travel schedule allowed him to operate with a fatal lack of local proximate accountability. His membership at a local church was purely nominal. The platform elevated him entirely beyond the reach of genuine, daily pastoral shepherding.
So the platform creates this zone of impunity. And what about Mike Pilavachi? He operated in the Anglican charismatic tradition, right?
Yeah.
Leading those massive Soul Survivor youth festivals in the UK.
Yes. And Pilavachi's case is a devastating example of utilizing anointed spiritual status to bypass accountability. An independent review substantiated allegations that he utilized his immense spiritual authority to systematically coerce young male interns into highly inappropriate physical contact.
Right, including full-body oil massages and aggressive wrestling matches.
Exactly. And he maintained psychological control through a pattern of ghosting interns who displeased him, abruptly cutting off their access to his massive platform.
Which is devastating for a young intern.
Absolutely. And structurally, for nearly 20 years, his church operated under a specific legal framework called a Bishop's Mission Order, or BMO. This practically removed formal legal accountability to the wider Anglican diocese. His status as a spiritual celebrity and the massive success of his festivals caused the organizational trustees to do practically nothing, despite widespread internal knowledge of his behavior.
Okay, so the common denominators across all of these incredibly disparate cases are glaringly obvious. We have weaponized NDAs, governing boards composed entirely of sycophants, complete proximity failure, and this deeply ingrained institutional reflex to treat victims as acceptable collateral damage for the sake of preserving the global brand.
It's the same pattern everywhere.
We've seen how this corporate insulation works in the United States, in the United Kingdom. But a fascinating question arises. Is this a uniquely Western disease? Does this celebrity machinery work in different socioeconomic climates, or does it mutate when exported?
Oh, it absolutely exports, but it expertly adapts to the local economic environment. Let's look at how this plays out in what the report calls the Asian variant. We have to shift our focus to Singapore, because where Western celebrity culture collides with rapid economic development and hypercapitalism, you get a highly potent, highly lucrative sociological variant.
Singapore is such a fascinating context for this. It is characterized by intense urban modernity, astonishingly rapid economic development over the last few decades, and a strict, really fierce cultural meritocracy. There is a fervent cultural drive for upward mobility, which sociologists often colloquialize as the pursuit of the 5 C's.
It's 5 C's, right. Cash, car, credit card, condominium, and country club membership.
Exactly.
And sociologists observe that independent Pentecostal and charismatic megachurches in Singapore have expertly synchronized their theology with these intense national socioeconomic impulses. They achieve this primarily through the propagation of the prosperity gospel.
And the prosperity gospel, in sociological terms, is a framework that equates material wealth, career advancement, and physical health directly with divine favor. It basically argues that if you have enough faith, God will physically and financially reward you in this life.
Right. And sociologically, this is a brilliant and highly effective tool because it seamlessly resolves the existential and moral awkwardness of extreme wealth for the rapidly emergent middle and upper classes in Singapore.
Oh, that makes so much sense.
It allows upwardly mobile professionals to engage in conspicuous consumption without the guilt traditionally associated with historical Christian asceticism or self-denial. In this framework, massive wealth isn't a distraction from spiritual life. It is tangible, irrefutable proof of your obedience and divine favor.
So if you drive a luxury car or live in a multi-million-dollar condominium, it is literally evidence that you are more favored by the divine. That generates immense psychological and social power. The report refers to this accumulation of influence as Christian capital.
Exactly. It is a formidable blend of massive financial wealth, aggressive real estate dominion, and transnational media influence. The celebrity pastor in this context becomes the ultimate localized manifestation of divine blessing and meritocratic success.
Because they have the most wealth.
Right. Their personal wealth validates the entire theological framework for the congregation. Let's examine the first major case study in this context. City Harvest Church, or CHC, founded by Kong Hee.
This case is staggering in its complexity and its absolute audacity. Kong Hee built CHC into one of the most influential congregations in Asia, boasting over 24,000 attendees. He emphasized what he called the cultural mandate, the belief that the church must actively infiltrate secular industries like arts, entertainment, and business to influence society from the top down.
Yes.
And this theology birthed the Crossover Project in 2002.
The Crossover Project was an unprecedented initiative to use the secular pop music career of Kong Hee's wife, Sun Ho, as an evangelistic tool. The strategy was to make her a massive secular pop star. She eventually collaborated with major Western producers like Wyclef Jean and used her fame to reach unchurched populations globally.
Okay, but funding a secular pop star who collaborates with Wyclef Jean, shoots high-end music videos in Hollywood, and lives a jet-setting lifestyle is incredibly expensive.
Very.
How did they finance this without alarming the congregation?
Well, the execution of this project led to the most significant financial scandal and criminal trial in Singapore's religious history. In 2015, Kong Hee and 5 other senior leaders were convicted of criminal breach of trust. The legal mechanics of what they did are crucial to understand. The court found that the leaders had misappropriated 24 million Singapore dollars from the church's legally restricted building fund.
And just to clarify, a restricted fund means you legally cannot use it for anything other than what it was raised for, right?
Exactly. So they could not simply write a check to a pop star from a building fund. So they diverted the money into sham corporate bonds.
Let's break down what a sham bond is in this context, because that sounds complicated. A normal bond is essentially a loan. You give a company money, and they promise to pay it back with interest.
Precisely. The church leadership diverted the $24 million into bonds issued by 2 companies, a management firm called Extron and a glass manufacturing firm called Furna.
Okay.
On paper, it looked like the church was making a standard, responsible corporate investment. However, the court revealed that these companies were essentially shell entities secretly controlled by the church leaders themselves.
Oh, my goodness.
The money wasn't an investment. It was immediately funneled through these companies directly into Sun Ho's pop music career.
They created a fake investment portfolio to launder church building funds into a music project. But eventually, external auditors are going to look at the books and ask why these bonds aren't paying any returns, right?
That is exactly what happened. When the church auditors grew suspicious of these transactions and began asking for proof of return on investment, the leadership panicked. To hide the initial theft, they engaged in a complex financial maneuver known as round-tripping.
What is that?
They misappropriated an additional $26.6 million of church funds, routed it through various accounts, and used it to falsely redeem the initial bonds. They essentially stole more money from the church to pay the church back, creating the false illusion that the initial investments had been legitimate and profitable.
It is Ponzi scheme adjacent. They utilized over $50 million to fund and then cover up a pop music project under the guise of evangelism. How did the internal governance fail to catch this earlier? Surely someone on staff noticed the massive irregularities.
Well, there was total structural opacity and a ruthless crushing of any internal dissent. When a church member and whistleblower, Roland Poon, attempted to expose the misuse of funds to the Straits Times newspaper in 2003, the church's leadership machinery completely mobilized against him.
What did they do?
They applied such intense psychological and legal pressure that Poon was forced to retract his claims entirely. Furthermore, he was compelled to personally spend over $33,000 to place public apologies in multiple national newspapers, completely destroying his own credibility to protect the leaders.
That is so dark.
The board governance was designed entirely to facilitate the leaders' absolute vision, not to provide objective fiduciary oversight. The theological pursuit of cultural relevance seamlessly morphed into massive criminal deception.
And the institutional loyalty was so deep that even when the criminal trial concluded, The reality of the situation was surreal. It ended with board member Chu Eng-han attempting to literally flee Singapore by a motorized boat the day before his prison sentence was set to begin. He was apprehended at sea.
It's incredible.
The corporate structure was entirely hijacked by the celebrity mandate. But City Harvest wasn't the only megachurch in Singapore generating astronomical wealth and pushing the boundaries of corporate governance. We also have to look at New Creation Church.
Yes. New Creation Church, or NCC, led by Senior Pastor Joseph Prince, provides another critical dimension of how wealth and celebrity interact with governance. Under Prince's leadership, the church grew to over 30,000 members.
Massive.
His specific theology focuses heavily on hypergrace. Sociologically, hypergrace deliberately divorces the believer from the demands of traditional moral law or behavioral striving. It emphasizes absolute forgiveness and blessing without conditions.
Which, sociologically, aligns perfectly with the capitalist pursuit of wealth.
Exactly. It offers spiritual liberation and divine approval without the burden of traditional moralistic asceticism or self-denial.
And Joseph Prince is not just a local pastor. He is a massive global celebrity. He broadcasts his program across major American television networks and writes international bestsellers.
Right. His global celebrity status translated into immense financial mobilization locally. The scale of capital is astonishing. In 2018, NCC raised 122 million Singapore dollars, making it the second most successful charitable fundraiser in the entire nation.
Wow.
The church constructed a $500 million performing arts center to house its services. Subsequently, they purchased the retail portion of the Star Vista shopping mall, where their venue is actually located for $296 million.
A shopping mall.
Yes,
Oh.
explicitly to protect their commercial interests from being acquired by entities that might not align with their values.
An independent church, raising the capital to buy a $300 million shopping mall to protect its real estate footprint. The sheer scale of that commercial integration is difficult to process. Did NCC face criminal charges like City Harvest?
No. NCC has not faced any criminal charges, and their financial operations have remained entirely legal. However, they have been subjected to intense public scrutiny regarding financial transparency and the profound blending of ecclesiastical authority with massive corporate governance.
Right.
In 2014, reports circulated alleging Prince was one of the wealthiest pastors globally, citing an annual salary of $550,000 and a net worth of $5 million US. The church council forcefully rebutted these claims, stating he had voluntarily stopped drawing a salary from the church in 2009 and his net worth was substantially lower, though they pointedly refused to provide exact financial figures to the public.
But the core structural issue highlighted in the report isn't just his personal net worth. It is how the entire multi-million-dollar institution is foundationally dependent on his specific personal brand.
Yes. That dependency raises the most critical question of corporate governance. Can a board govern objectively when a single individual is the primary economic engine of the entire enterprise?
Right.
The church's honorary secretary once publicly admitted to the press that Pastor Prince is the key man responsible for bringing in about 95% of our church's income.
95%.
Yeah.
That is a dangerous, almost impossible structural dynamic.
It is structurally fatal to the concept of accountability. It renders the governing board entirely subordinate to the pastor's continued popularity, his oratorical performance, and his public image. When an institution's financial survival, its ability to pay staff, manage a $500 million performing arts center, and operate a shopping mall depends wholly on one man's brand, objective corporate governance becomes a structural impossibility.
You simply cannot hold the rainmaker accountable if firing or disciplining him instantly bankrupts the organization.
The board ceases to be a governing body and becomes a brand management team.
That's exactly what happens. So we have looked at the Western models of complete collapse, and we have examined the Asian variants, where massive wealth compounds the structural vulnerabilities. The disease is demonstrably widespread. It spans continents, it crosses wildly different theological traditions, and it scales across varying economic brackets. The cult of personality, when shielded by corporate governance structures and non-disclosure agreements, inevitably leads to systemic vulnerability. So if the disease is this pervasive and the current machinery is this broken, what is the cure?
Well, the report dedicates a significant portion to outlining a radical prescription for reclaiming accountability. The overwhelming evidence suggests that you cannot simply tweak the existing machinery.
Right, you can't just put a Band-Aid on it.
Exactly. You cannot solve a structural problem by merely adding an HR department or updating a code of conduct while leaving the power dynamics completely intact. The report argues for a systemic paradigm shift. Institutions must actively dismantle the personality-driven model in favor of historically grounded, robustly plural, and highly ordinary alternatives. The first necessary structural corrective is completely abandoning the presbyterial and isolated parachurch models.
That means legally dismantling those autonomous board structures where a founder handpicks their own overseers.
Yes, it requires a return to genuine, legally binding plurality. That means the senior leader's vote on the board holds absolutely no more weight than any other member. Furthermore, the board cannot be composed of employees whose livelihood depends on the lead pastor, nor can it be dominated by wealthy sycophants who are merely fans of the leader's vision.
They have to be independent.
Entirely independent. The governing body must possess both the unhesitating willingness and the clear, legally established mechanism to terminate the lead pastor immediately upon disqualification. Additionally, for independent megachurches and massive parachurch organizations, the report mandates voluntary submission to external independent auditing bodies.
That means complete financial transparency. It means the absolute elimination of shadow boards, secret discretionary funds, and the weaponization of NDAs to silence victims.
It means treating organizational transparency not as a corporate liability, but as a fundamental requirement for ethical operation. But the prescription goes far beyond just reforming the boardroom. The report argues for the active dismantling of the brand itself, starting with ending video venue satellite models.
Oh, the video venue model is incredibly common now. A megachurch has one charismatic speaker at a central location, and their sermon is broadcast on high-definition screens to half a dozen other satellite campuses across the region or even the country.
Right. And the practice of projecting a single charismatic orator onto massive screens inherently celebritizes the speaker. It relies on the medium of broadcast media, which fundamentally alters the relationship between the speaker and the audience. It starves local congregations of proximate incarnational shepherding.
They just become an audience.
Exactly. The report argues that institutions must install live local teaching at every single venue. By decentralizing the communication, you diffuse the power and mitigate the too-big-to-fail dynamic where the entire organization relies on just one face.
You have to deliberately break the monopoly on attention. This ties directly into a profound point made by cultural critic Caitlin Beatty, which the report cites. She argues that celebrity is not just a neutral tool that can be used for good or evil.
Yes. Beatty points out that celebrity is inherently a worldly form of power. It is a mechanism of mass manipulation designed to generate consumer loyalty. It cannot be safely baptized or repurposed for authentic community use. The medium itself corrupts the message.
Wow.
The tools required to build and maintain a massive celebrity brand image curation, PR spin, the suppression of negative information are fundamentally at odds with the transparency required for genuine community. To combat this, leaders must actively resist the immense cultural and economic pressures to build a brand. They must deliberately step off the pedestal and re-engage in the messy, proximate life of the local congregation.
And the report gets very granular about what that proximity actually looks like in practice. It is shockingly mundane, but that is the whole point. It states that leaders need to park in standard parking lots, not secure VIP areas.
Right.
They need to visit the sick in person, actively engaging with physical suffering. They need to sit in meetings and take criticism from regular members without deploying defensive retaliation or using their platform to demean their critics. They must utterly reject the VIP culture of exclusive green rooms, private handlers, and security details. If an organization employs a bodyguard to keep the community away from the leader, they have completely destroyed proximity.
It's just a barrier. Furthermore, the broader ecosystem, what we might call the evangelical industrial complex, which includes the massive publishing houses, the seminaries, and the global conference organizers, must fundamentally alter their economic models.
How so?
They must stop platforming unproven, highly charismatic leaders based purely on their social media metrics, their podcast downloads, or their weekend attendance figures. Granting massive global platforms to individuals whose deep character has not been rigorously proven over decades of quiet, unglamorous service virtually guarantees the continued elevation of narcissists who view the platform as their personal right.
This entire analysis really brings us back to what Michael Horton called the extraordinary beauty of ordinary faith. We have to analyze why the ordinary doesn't sell in our modern economy. The ordinary doesn't generate massive book deals or fun performing arts centers,
No, it doesn't.
but the extraordinary performer inevitably collapses under the weight of their own manufactured image. We don't need a corporate stage for a flawless avatar. We need a localized model, bound by shared human frailty and mutual accountability. We need the safety of genuine proximity. The only cure for the disease of celebrity is a radical return to the ordinary.
Ultimately, a healthy organizational structure places its confidence not in the extraordinary rhetorical abilities, the branding savvy, or the aggressive entrepreneurial genius of a single visionary founder. It places its confidence in the ordinary, quiet, highly sustainable rhythms of local, accountable life.
Yeah.
When the focus successfully shifts back to that proximate reality, the toxic consumer demand for a flawless spiritual superhero diminishes naturally because the community is finding its vitality in mutual connection rather than vicarious performance.
This has been an incredibly eye-opening journey into the mechanics of power and failure. To summarize the ultimate takeaway from this deep dive, accountability absolutely requires proximity. You cannot manufacture accountability through corporate legal structures if the relational proximity is absent.
You really can't.
And true, sustainable leadership requires a profound willingness to be ordinary, to be transparent, and to be deeply known, rather than merely consumed as a curated image.
And we must remember that the structural and sociological lessons detailed in this report apply universally. Wherever you find the intersection of immense power, massive financial resources, and intense charisma operating without rigorous, independent, and proximate oversight, you will inevitably find these exact same systemic vulnerabilities.
Everywhere.
Whether that is within a massive religious institution, a Silicon Valley corporation, or a political movement, the mechanics of human nature remain completely consistent.
Which brings me to a final thought I want to leave you with. Something for you to ponder on your own after we sign off. We have spent this time dissecting the structural failures of massive religious institutions. But if the root cause of these systemic collapses is our very human demand for secondhand living, our deep psychological desire to outsource our own arduous personal growth to a charismatic, flawless avatar, how is this exact same consumerist mindset secretly dictating the structures of the other communities you belong to? Think about your workplace dynamics. Think about your political affiliations and the politicians you elevate to save your status. Think about the influencers you follow online and allow to shape your worldview. Who are you currently granting social power without proximity? And what happens when they inevitably decide that they are the brand and you are simply the consumer? When we analyze the bridge now, the structural logic of its collapse isn't murky after all. The stress fractures of celebrity and unchecked power are highly predictable. The only question is, are we willing to look closely enough to see those fractures in our own communities before the collapse occurs? Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning, keep exploring the structures around you, and we'll see you next time.